Hi guys, how's it going? Jake Wilson here, and today we're going to be talking about improvisation. So I want you to picture the scene. You're playing a gig and everything's going great. The band sounds fantastic, the audience are loving it, your guitar sounds awesome, it's the best tone in the world, everything's going amazingly well. And it's now your turn to solo. What do you think about? What goes through your mind at that point? So I'm very interested in performance psychology, and what actually is going through your head at that point is going to have a massive effect on what comes out of your playing. And I think that can't really be overstated. Now, obviously, we need to separate two concepts from one another. And I just want to shelve some ideas first before we move on. So I want to separate what we do in preparation for our improvisation in terms of, you can never do enough scale work on your pocket, studying harmony. You can never do too much of that stuff. And it's going to massively help. How will you improvise? Of course it is. But there's also this thing of, well, where's your head at when you're playing? And I think these are two slightly, they're obviously related things, but they are separate. They are separate issues. And we're going to be looking at the one over here. We're going to be looking at the mental space and a few techniques that will help you to improvise more effectively. And they're just things to try out, experiment getting into different mindsets and getting into focusing on different things and see how you get on. Please, at the end of this video, just pick up a guitar and try it out, because that's the only way I can really get this across, is if you can actually give this stuff a go. So in many ways, these are strategies to help you just kind of keep things fresh. One really effective thing you can do to improve your improvisational skills is to use what some people call limitation exercises, where you might say, well, I'm going to play this solo, but all on one string. Now, very, very, very few people actually play like that. What these limitation exercises are doing, and we're not going to go through them in this video, that's for another time, but what they're really doing is that they're sort of preparing your brain to see the instrument in various different ways, and they're trying to force you to see the instrument and approach the instrument differently. These are really, really useful, and some of them obviously kind of have a bit of overlap with the things we're going to be talking about, but I just wanted to put that to one side for a moment. So this is all about how you stretch your kind of improvisational brain power, keep you on your toes, and operating in a way in which music can flow through you. So of course I could go on forever about this kind of thing, but I've tried to limit this video to 6 pieces of advice or tips, or however you want to look at them. And what I'd love is to just expose people to this idea that where your head's at can really affect how you're playing. And don't worry, it's not all Zen stuff. It's not about kind of emptying your mind and playing like that. That stuff's really, really interesting and really helpful too. But what I've tried to do here is to create a list of really practical tips so that you can put yourself in the kind of improvising mindset, and they can just help you break out of old habits. So if you're in a bit of a sort of funk and bit of a rut, these can really help you get out of that. And with this list, it doesn't matter what level you're at. I think that they are just universally useful pieces of information. So it's not an exhaustive list, but it's a start. Obviously, you can get creative with all of this. There's absolutely limitless potential to some of these ideas. The first thing I'd like you to try is to vocalize when you're improvising. All that means is that you're going to use your mouth to actually either sing what you're playing or just sing the kind of overall shape. If you listen to someone like Keith Jarrett, who's considered to be one of the sort of greatest improvisers ever, he has this kind of strange habit of, I wouldn't call it singing, but there's something going on that goes along with his playing. And what's really going on here? I think it makes me play really, really differently when I do this. So one thing that I find really interesting about this, and I've been trying to think about how I can summarize what's going on mentally. It's really hard to get those things across, as you can imagine. But one of the things I find is that my phrasing and phrase structures take on a more linguistic property. So, for example, I have to breathe, and that instantly puts some sort of gaps in where I'm playing. It also really intuitively connects you to things like the pacing and notions of climax, because you can embody that feeling and that sound. Now, if you don't want to do this live because you think you're going to look a bit silly, which I totally understand, by the way, what you can do is just sort of, mouth the rhythm a bit, like keep that under your breath. Just doing something like that can really, really help kind of open you up, and you just kind of play more spontaneously, but also with a natural phrasing. I think it's really, 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 really valuable to do that. Scott Henderson, in his tutorials, talks about using a story to create phrase structures. Now, I like that idea. I think it demonstrates an amazing point, but unfortunately, it racked me with anxiety when I did it, because I didn't know what story I was going to tell, and maybe that's part of the problem. But I just wanted to sort of play. So I found that this vocalizing thing helped me to bridge that gap between kind of linguistic phrase structures and narratives and all that sort of stuff, without getting anxious about worrying whether my story was any good or not. So the second tip is to focus on rhythm when you're playing. Now, obviously this is related to the first tip, but one thing I find, if I just go, okay, right, just focus on rhythm, I can just let go of any anxiety about what notes I'm playing. And funnily enough, by doing that, because hopefully I've done some preparation over the years I've been playing, that the notes just kind of come. And by focusing on rhythm, I find another thing happens, which is a kind of byproduct of this mental technique, is that when we talk about rhythm, we then start thinking about accent and dynamics and articulation. So they kind of all combine, because I'm just thinking rhythmically. And it could be any notes that I apply to that, and it will sound cool. And the notes just kind of come from somewhere. But by focusing on rhythm, for some reason, it just gives things a really nice shape. That doesn't mean you have to be complex in how you approach this. You could just think, right, just eighth notes for now. You could limit yourself in that way. And I find that, if I'm having a bit of a bad day, this is one way in which I can really find my way into an improvisation. If I can just kind of pick a rhythmic unit, I can kind of get inside the music a bit more. It's almost like I get myself into a state where I can continue on from there and just kind of shed this stuff. Now, another thing that I like to do, so let's call this tip number 3, is to repeat and develop ideas. Now, this sounds like, a kind of intellectual, theoretical thing, but it's something that so many people forget to do when they're improvising. And it's one thing that really marks a kind of master improviser apart from a more amateurish improviser. So this doesn't have to be a kind of analytical exercise. It could just be really, really literal. Just repeat stuff. With repetition, just repeating something is development, because the listener has heard it once and they've heard it again. Are you going to repeat it again? Now this is really interesting rhetoric to sort of play with in your solo, and if you make it the focus of your improvisation, that's a really effective strategy to create something that's really cool. Obviously, this relies a little bit more on how much control you have over pitch, harmony, rhythm and stuff, but honestly, it's something that I think people should be doing from a far earlier stage in their development as a musician. Tip number 4 is a bit of a cliche, but it's so valid, and that's to listen to what's going on around you. To just you can use that stuff in your improvisation. If you're listening, if your ears are open, you listen to what the bass player is doing, listen to what the drums are doing. Where's the space for you in this? Again, that can just be a really good thing to kind of bear in mind when you're starting. Just latch on to a rhythmic unit or a space in the texture where you can kind of exist. So I find this really useful at the start of a solo, for example, if I can just kind of listen and hear my way into the music. I suppose the whole idea that I'm trying to get across is that sometimes the music itself can suggest where you should go with your playing. It's like a kind of brainwash. Just listen deeply, and you kind of have to trust yourself to then act. Tip number 5 is to plan a strong opening gambit, your initial statement, if you like. This sounds like strange advice. It's much more practical than some of the other things that I've said in this video. But bear with me a moment, because I think what I find is that if the solo starts well, then I can kind of stay on my trajectory throughout it. And these opening statements, they're your kind of, the way into this world that you're going to create when you're improvising. So, if you're reading a book, you want that opening statement to be kind of, wow, where's this going? And there's no shame or harm in just having an idea of what that's going to be as you go into it. So personally, I like to think of, making my opening statement usually quite simple, quite bold. That can just sort of set the tone for everything I do after that. If this has been done really well, I find that I'm just a bit more kind of into what's happening because, all of a sudden the phrase space is there. I'm not necessarily talking about preparing a phrase. I've just been kind of preparing your head for, right, big statement time, here we go, going to play. Obviously, if your big statement is something really flashy and fast and powerful and aggressive, that's great too. These options are all open to you, but you kind of have to know that if you do that, you're setting yourself up to create contrasts in other ways after that. And then all of a sudden, it's kind of like a cumulative effect of creating interesting material after that. And finally, tip number 6 is to commit to your improvisation. So I'm sure you guys know and love the guitar playing of Gary Moore. Now, if you watch him playing, he's utterly committed. You can see his unfortunate facial expressions. I'm guilty of that too, as many of you have pointed out. But do you know what? If you're trying to stop yourself from doing that stuff, you're not embodying the music. So you're kind of putting up a barrier. You're not letting yourself really flow. I sometimes feel that if I'm having a bad day playing wise, it's because I'm not really committed, not really going for it. Don't be scared to close your eyes. You probably don't need them as much as you think you do when it comes to guitar playing. It's a really good way of kind of letting go of any apprehension or fear. But yeah, if I can really embody the music that I'm playing and sort of let myself go with it, sway a bit, it really helps me to, just get into what I'm doing. Now, I know that if I try not to do this, it really hurts my playing. If I have to stay too static, and this is a problem if you're filming yourself playing, because obviously you want to make sure that your shot's nice. But I find that, if I'm sitting down, I play in a different way to how I play if I'm standing up. There's just something about letting your body, go with what you're playing that helps you totally commit to what you're doing. It's almost like a kind of how can I put this? It's like a dance, like a dance to sort of center you. And I think it can stop you from over-intellectualizing what you're doing and think more gesturally about the noises that you want to come out of your instrument. And sometimes you just got to let go of any inhibitions and just play, just dig in and play. And now this doesn't have to be an aggressive thing. This can be a serene thing too. And it's very, very hard to explain, but I think you know what I'm talking about. A really good idea would be to record yourself playing and just make a note of the headspace you adopted for each take, or the sort of mental technique, or the sort of whatever you were centering your improvisation on, so that you can hear how it affects your playing. And I think that would be really valuable. And that's exactly what I did with the playing examples in this video. So thanks for bearing with me through this video. I know it's a slightly awkward thing to talk about. But yeah, if you enjoyed this stuff, please leave a comment, like the video and subscribe to my channel. And do check out my JTC products. I've left a link in the description box below. I actually touch on a lot of this stuff in the Practice Toolkit PDF, so that might be one to check out. So what would be great is if you could just pick up your guitar now and have a little jam to the loop that I've put at the end. So thanks again for watching, and take it easy.